The final chapter in Psychology of Performance, I can't cite the research. I know that Eddie O'Connor refers to some of it for athletes. That sports psychologist, Eddie O'Connor, talked about how I can start recommending other resources like Eddie O'Connor's Psychology of Performance. Sure. Dr. Eddie O'Connor in the Psychology of Performance has a chapter on burnout. I quote Dr. Eddie O'Connor again. Okay, here we are. Hi, Dr. Eddie.
Hey there, how are you?
It's the Draftsmen Show. Yeah.
How are you doing today?
Excellent. It's great. Very excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Thank you.
Okay. Well, excellence is a key word of what you have been teaching about. I'm going to introduce you by telling everybody what they already know. In our audience, you know that 2 years ago, I took this course through the great courses, the Psychology of Performance, How to Be Your Best in Life, a huge claim. And after 2 months immersed in it, I wrote on the inside front cover, Marshall spent 2 months going through this book twice, transferring notes, etc. This has been the greatest gold mine of a course that I've found in about 30 years, applicable to training students in the arts, but also to me beginning a new career. And I found it hugely valuable. The content is extraordinary, and the byline of how to be your best in life is hardly an exaggeration. We have an hour with Dr. Eddie himself. And so I'm going to ask questions best I can. I've got to tell you, the hardest thing about asking you questions is that in the last 2 days, I've been reviewing this book, the guidebook, and I feel like you have answered almost every question that I have had to ask about performing. So it's a little bit of like, what do I do now? Just spend the hour expressing fandom to you as a teacher?
You know, I have to really give a lot of credit to the great courses. And when they pursued me about this, they were really saying, hey, we'd like you to apply it to life. And through no big negotiation, but through their guidance and their leadership, being able to come together, and then the feedback in the years that it's come out from people like yourself, but people from all ages. I think one of the first reviews I got was somebody who was 75 and said that they wish they had it 50 years ago.
Yes.
But how it still applied to every dimension, parents, and every aspect of musicians, performing artists. The idea that we're able to, and we're going to discover this all here today, is that while it's based in sports psychology, that's just the context. And the way that I in particular like to work is say, let's understand the way our thoughts and feelings influence behaviors. And then we can talk about it in any context. And so I'm really looking forward to applying it to your audience here today.
Okay. Well, I noticed that at the beginning of the guidebook, there is a disclaimer. You have it in the videos too. That lets people know that we don't want to claim more than we ought to, or that you ought not to use this as a medical reference to diagnose, treat, or prevent medical or mental health illnesses or trauma. Do you want to tell us anything about why the disclaimer is in there? Have you had experiences where people felt like, this is the answer to everything in my life?
Honestly, I think it's just, it legally has to be there. It's, I believe it's in every one of the courses, or we have it on our general websites, the psychologists and stuff too, because if you're going to treat a mental health issue, for example, we're going to have a formal relationship. There's going to be a certain amount of responsibility and requirements that's in there. And so since these are more intended for general public consumption and information and education, of course, we want to be as scientifically accurate as possible. However, it's more of a one-directional relationship. And so it's just, I think, some legal terms to clarify that, much like this here today, is that it can't be the substitute for having a personal relationship with a psychologist or sports or performance psychologist to address your specific issues. At the same time, I don't want to undersell it too much and say that, this information is valid and important and research-based. And by all means, don't be afraid to use it. It just, I think, helps the courses or the websites and things of that nature to say we're not personally responsible, because we can't be, because we don't know you.
Right. Yeah. I guess it's saying that as excited as you may get about this material, it does not mean that that you are guaranteed eternal life, that you will never die because you have learned to be your best in life. That one of the things that impressed me about it is that when I was about 19 years old, I found self-help books and really absorbed self-help books and got a lot out of them. But as time went on, I felt that there was a lot of over-promising, under-delivering, and much of it was just based on emotional and imaginary speculations about how things would go. This course is so grounded in research. You have lifetimes of research, all boiled down so that over those 24 topics, which the titles of the lectures alone are what sold me on, if somebody's going to spend one chapter, one lecture on this title, it's going to get me thinking about these things. Those alone were enough to motivate me to go for it. But then when I got into it and I saw how balanced you were, about how the research conclusively shows this, but it does not conclusively show this, but there's some evidence for this, there was a sense of confidence. There was a sense of that I'm with a grown-up who I can trust, who really knows this and is going to guide me well. So that was one of the reasons why it was something worth delving into and taking every little bit out of it.
Well, thank you. A couple of things about that. One, it partially reflects my personal philosophy, and you'll get this in the next hour, is that you are responsible for your performance. Like if you're going to excel, nobody else can do it for you. It doesn't matter how good of a teacher I am or how much I want it for you. I am absolutely powerless. And so the more that we can assume the responsibility for our performance, the better off we're going to be. The second aspect is, again, in the curriculum that we put together, I was so excited because I was like, okay, well, you got this course idea, this title, like, what do you want? What do you need in it? And they're like, well, that's up to you. So I got to create this from scratch, which was a joy because I'd seen what had already been out there. And I was like, well, how do I make this unique and different than what has previously been done? And so again, as you'll see that it comes through it with the emphasis of acceptance. And I'm a psychologist, a sports psychologist, performance psychologist. I don't believe in positive thinking. I think motivation is overrated. And we'll get to that because life is hard and excellence is difficult. And if we don't start to accept the things that need to be endured, then we're not going to succeed. So we can't always be positive in negative situations. I mean, if you've got a big art show coming up, why should you not be nervous? That doesn't make any sense to me. So promoting, why should you think that you should succeed if you haven't prepared? There's a danger to overly being confident or having too much positive thinking. So I wanted to really go through the course and make it very, very grounded. And the third aspect is, this has nothing to do with me. I'm just a conduit of all the shoulders that I'm standing on of everybody else's research. So it was easy to kind of maybe do the opposite of what sometimes will be like they're trying to sell a product or make these promises to make a buck. And this is really, no, look, this has nothing to do with me. This is just the information that's out there. Let's see if we can pull it together and make the world a better place. So I'm glad to hear that actually came through. This isn't my stuff. This is the world's stuff. I'm glad I was able to just put it into a few hours for you.
Well, I want to ask you personally, why did you get into this? I mean, you've devoted your life to, we should probably say that performing is one aspect of it, but another aspect of it is this is the psychology of performance. This is not training your muscles and your body so much as it is training your mind and your attitudes and what has worked. You even begin that first chapter on the history of the psychology of performance to show how about 100 plus years ago, people started to see that there were certain ways of people organizing their time, their life, their conversations that would affect performance. And then by the time the 20th century came in, it developed as psychology developed. And then by the time the late 20th century came in, the amount of money that sports offered meant that research was being done like I had no idea about, so that we can rest assured that this is a confident claim. What got you into this? Were you an athlete to begin?
I was. I don't know that was a very good one, but it started with psychology, actually. Very interesting. Like, for whatever reason, I always I always like to talk and to help people. You hear every psychologist like to say that. But even in elementary school, I remember if somebody needed me, I'd be the person to talk to. Even though the bully that we'd get into a fight, I'm from the Bronx, so you did fights back then. And I would still talk to him about his problems. It was a natural fit for me. I remember in high school, I would lay in bed at night reading Freud's analysis of dreams because I found it fascinating. So I had no doubt that I wanted to be a psychologist. I went to college, and then it wasn't until the last class that I took of sports psychology, I didn't know that it existed. And it intrigued me because I was a runner in high school. It was all about my athletic identity. I was a runner, cross country, indoor, outdoor. And to tell you a quick story, it didn't end well. I was dedicated. I had the greatest work ethic. Again, I was middle of the pack. And I got stuck my senior year where I kept running. I was at 800 meters. I was trying to break 210. I kept hitting 211 my junior year and all through my senior year. And with my training, I should have been easily breaking this. And for those of you that run or whatever, that's really fast for me now. That'd be amazing. But in high school, it's okay. But I kept crossing the finish line, throwing up as if I was exhausted. And I wasn't tired. And this happened week after week after week. And I had no idea what was going on. It wasn't until I went to graduate school and learned more about this, what I figured out was that my identity was so wrapped up in my performance that my unconscious fear of failure, because let's be honest, I was still running 211. I wasn't winning races. I was still failing. I kept hope alive by not giving 100% unconsciously. And then even trying to convince myself that this throwing up as if I was tired. Now, I've worked out and thrown up tired. This was different. But something in me unconsciously was so threatened by the idea, if I give 100% and I still fail and I don't break 210, I had this tremendous identity crisis and fear of what would happen. Now, here's my first intervention to everybody listening. If I had just answered the question, I probably would have been fine, because it's not like Nike was pursuing me. I was getting no college scholarships. My girlfriend, and family still loved me. Nothing would have been different if I had tried harder and failed. But it didn't feel that way. And here's another big point, because our anxiety isn't related to often the reality of what's going on outside. It's related to how much we care about something. And I cared about breaking 210. And all this unconscious stuff went on. So anyway, quick tangent. The good news is at my last meet, I did run 209. I'm not sure if Brother Linus maybe was a little quick on the thumb, as my last race, but I'm going to take the official time was 209, and I did that. But I was left. Could I have done 205? Could I have run a 159 and really been fast? How much of my mind got in my way? So I was fascinated by that. And I never looked back. Once I went to graduate school, I didn't want to just do the mental toughness training. I was still interested in psychology and in what would hold people back. And so that passion to help others. So I wanted to understand the athlete as a whole. So I got my degree in clinical psychology and the traditional psychologist path and license, but an emphasis in sports psychology and the issues that athletes suffer from most. So pain and injury, perfectionism, performance anxiety in particular is what I do a ton of right now, in addition to team dynamics, as well as in the mental performance stuff. And I've just been in love with it. I'm as excited about it today as I was 20 plus years ago. Because we're really built to grow, and that's what life is about. And self-determination theory, as you learned in the course, says that we are built to grow and develop. And I just found that when people would tell me, especially starting sports, well, just think positive. I'm like, that doesn't work. I've tried that. There's stuff that's still in my head that I just can't get rid of or change because of the fifth graders that, were bullies in the playground. Doesn't everybody have a story like that? These kids that are still in your head, and other things that we come up with. The joy that I get now when people are stuck and I can help them release it, get unstuck, reach their potential. I never, ever get tired of that. And the fact that it doesn't take very long. I mean, we're not talking about 6 years of therapy or something. It's like what you're going to learn here today, what's in the course. The fact, and this is what I love about the podcast and the course, is the fact that now we can do this, with one recording and then reach thousands. That's just overwhelming to me about what a ripple effect and impact I can make. So that's how I got in, and that's why I stay in, and that's why I'm going to do this to the day I die.
Okay, well, yes, you didn't mention that anywhere in the book that, or in the guidebook or in the course, as I recall, about your personal reasons. There is a chapter in there, chapter 3, about how values and goals drive performance, and that certainly relates to what you're talking about. And also taking the time to actually write out. Values, as I recall, were like a compass. Goals are more like a map. And that was only chapter 3. So right there at the beginning, there was a sense of, I want to make sure that I understand why I have these goals.
Yeah.
And that there is research to show that if you can keep why in mind, it will help you do better. You've got a greater goal, a more abstract goal over those concrete goals.
Right. And they work in synergy. And the really two great things about values, and I love that you brought that up again. So a goal is sort of like the destination that you want to get to in a map. But once you get there, you're there. And then it's like, now what? So, as a runner, it would always be, what's the next race? What's the next achievement? What's the next product or thing that we have to do? Right. So, and goals are great, but then we have to kind of keep resetting them. Whereas a value is something that you live every day and you never achieve it. Things like honesty, creativity, strength, intimacy, family. And when you have that, you can do it every day and then wake up and do it again. And the benefit of this is because you don't achieve it, there is no end goal there, it's a constant source of motivation. It's really your value that helps you overcome the adversity because, as you said, it's your why. Mm-hmm. And so since I'm not doing it for a particular outcome, but I'm honest because I believe in honesty, when it's tough to be honest, it kind of checks in at the identity level and say, but this is what I do, and I can be more consistent. So when your values match up with what you want to become or do, or you tie your goals into your values, when the process of achievement becomes difficult, maybe you don't care about that outcome as much as you used to. Maybe you're discovering it's a lot harder than you thought it would be. But if the process is tied into the value, now you're doing it because that's what you do, more at the level of identity.
Mm-hmm. Now, this can be a little abstract to a person who, when they hear the word values, don't have something concrete to lock onto. And when I was writing out what my values were, I know that the higher values were that I want to do my best work, which is why that byline meant so much to me. But then I can start to get analytical. Why do you want to do your best work? Well, because I was humiliated when I was younger for doing such shoddy work. So is that what you're doing? You're going to spend your life running away from the humiliation you had in the 4th grade? And I have to look at it and say, yeah, that's part of it. But it's not all of it. The other part of it is how much I loved comic books and the Three Stooges and other things that were just so much a part of my life. I used to go to sleep at night just in love with TV shows. They gave value to my life. And so there was also a positive motivation is when I grow up, could I do good work like my neighbors who write the television shows do? So there was the honesty of both. There is a fear thing and there is an aspiration to positivity. And then also the love of, ever since I was younger, I wanted to work with friends, even in junior high. How are we going to make our living together? How can we do stuff so we do really good stuff and we do it together as a team? So that was going back to things that I think were core childhood values that were developed in childhood. Can you give us any examples of how values can go awry that you may have? In other words, the fear thing. If as a therapist, you hear someone who their values are to not be humiliated for doing bad work, what goes on in your head in response to that?
Yeah, as you were talking, I was already analyzing you and I'm going to use you as an example. But
okay.
I mean, for everybody who's watching and listening, I mean, you can hear the difference in the way that you spoke of the two motivations. So again, scientifically speaking, we're going to have all of these internal and external motivators, and it's okay. We don't have to get rid of one or the other. I think one of the big issues I see in performers in all contexts is they want to know what's the one right way. And there isn't. It's not simple. We're complicated. So we want to allow a lot of these other things. So this negative motivation that you have to not be humiliated again, it's okay to have it. I don't want to get hurt. So that motivates me from being, putting myself in bad situations. This is where I really justify a lot of people when they have anxiety. I'm like, anxiety is not bad. Anxiety prevents you from doing really stupid things and getting killed or, making mistakes. Like, we just have to interact with it differently. If we're consumed with it, or that's the major aspect of it, we heard in your voice almost the distress, like you were reliving 4th grade. And it was more about like running away from a bear as opposed to what we want, running towards gold. Now they look the same, but they feel really different. And so when you bring up the idea, as soon as you started talking about the comic books, I mean, your voice lifted up higher, your smile got bigger, and I bet your heart was thumping in a joyous way. And it's okay to have the balance between the two, but without having that positive motivation, or I don't like positive, meaningful. Now, you don't even have to know why it's important to you. One of mine is strength. I love CrossFit and working out, and I had to put that in because, CrossFitters, we have to talk about CrossFit, so now that I can check that off. But I have found that once I found that sport compared to all the other sports that I had done, it's because it was tied into my value of strength. I have no idea why I value strength. All I know is that when I'm lifting heavy things, it feels good. It feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I can't explain it. And when I ran track, people would say, "Why track? You're running around in a circle." I'm like, yeah, I know. I don't know. This is the very definition of intrinsic motivation. It just feels good. And somehow I'm built to want to help other people overcome their obstacles to excellence. I don't know why I decided to be that. I just know that that's who I am. And so that is the stuff that's going to carry you through all kinds of difficulty. Whereas we could give in to the negativity and the anxiety because our basic human nature is to protect ourselves and not get hurt. So if we're only motivated by avoiding things, it could hurt our performance because now we're going to avoid taking risks. We're going to avoid putting ourselves out there. We're going to avoid rejection. We're going to avoid, opportunities that, where we may fail. And if that's our main motivation, we can use it a little bit to work hard and prepare so that we don't. But we also want to remember, will this pain be worth it? Am I willing to fail once in a while, or sometimes even often, in service of growing, so that I can, in my case, help those people or make that Olympic lift, or in your audience cases, create that art that brings joy to the world. And if we can make some space for the pain in service of that contribution that we want to make, it changes everything.
This was another thing I very much appreciated about your teaching, is that there was a balance between acknowledging negative and pursuing positive. The chapter on, what was it called, When Positive Thinking Doesn't Work, was such a realistic view. And all through the course, there was an awareness of don't pretend like the negative isn't there. I can't remember whether you used the term. There's a difference between letting things go and closeting them. But also even some practical recommendations for if a child is interested in a sport, the best way to start is with play. Mm-hmm. And then from play, when the child likes the play enough, to lessons. And then from lessons to taking it more seriously, to where gradually there's commitment and there's the embracing of pain more. It was just a very practical approach that goes perfectly with people going into the arts. The memories the fact that you got excited about lifting heavy things, or that a person gets excited about running around. I guess what it really comes down to, it doesn't make that much difference why.
Not from a cognitive aspect. Yeah, you don't have to defend it. In fact, when I've asked my athletes or performers, again, when I say, why do you do what you do? The ones that are enjoying it the most, they just look at me and smile and they say, I don't know. I just love it. Yeah. It's when they have all these cognitive reasons that I kind of wonder, is that from your parents or your teachers or because somebody told you? But when I ask that question, the ones that end up, I know can do it through the long haul and will work with me and be invested in the mental training, they're the ones that are like, I don't know, but they just get this wash of chemicals over them that they're just happier because when they're doing it.
Yeah. Which is kind of a gift to not be analytical about it.
Yeah.
There's a story teacher, Robert McKee, who explains that in storytelling, developing protagonists and characters, the most important thing ultimately is what the character wants and acts toward, because that's where the story is going to come from. And knowing why they want it, whether it came from a childhood trauma or something else, can be completely irrelevant. Some of the greatest and most powerful characters, we never know why they're going for it. All we know is that they're going for it, and we're going to watch them to see what kind of trouble they're going to cause for themselves and for others. Some authors care about the motivations that stem from childhood. Many great authors care nothing about that. They want to show you the trial of the pursuit of this character's quest. And I think that that is applying to what we're talking about here. If a person isn't analytical, but they are driven by a passion and a love, they're in pursuit, is it that important what the childhood origins of it are?
Well, let's take a direct performance-enhancing approach to this. And for those analytical people, if you did find out why, would that change anything in the way that you prepare or practice or perform? And I have yet to hear from anybody say, yeah, it would change everything. Because whatever the reason is, all that analysis actually takes you away from what is ultimately most important, which is the doing, the deliberate practice, which I know you talk a lot about. The actual doing of your art, of your creativity and engaging it. Yeah. So if you just know that for whatever reason I want to do this, the only important thing about this is that you want to do it. I would analyze it if you're not sure if you want to, if you're doing it for somebody else. That's going to make a difference. But if you don't know why you're doing it, as long as it feels pure and it feels right and it feels good and it's not hurting anybody, like that can be enough. Because any more analysis is going to hurt your performance because now it's less time that you can actually spend on the actual doing.
Dr. David Viscott used to recommend that on a whiteboard, you would put the things that you want and love, and that you would look at it over a period of months or years so that you can see the lies you tell yourself. Because some of them are things you thought you loved, but weren't. That's meant a lot to me over the years, because there were things that I thought I loved, and as time went on, I never really did. But then there are other ones where there's no question. So this is the subjective aspect. This is the impulse. Dr. Eddie, I want to read some of the titles. Some people will be listening to this rather than looking at the screen where we can show your table of contents. That business of deliberate practice, essential for experts, was chapter 2. Right away, you're going to tell us the hard truth, which is that the only way we're going to get better is to be in our discomfort zones. Not too much, but enough to where if there's not some discomfort, we're not going to grow. And so the experts embrace this. And that's been so much a topic of our conversations in the last number of years. There's been so many books about it. But you started right in with that. Yeah. And then you went to the values and goals.
Actually, before you get to values and goals, if I can jump in on deliberate practice.
Yes, please
do. Just to
do.
give you one phrase that I've developed recently that I love to say, and I want your audience to hear this. Your art doesn't care about what you think and feel. I talk about this in some of the other chapters about the independence of thoughts, feelings, and emotions. But I'm going to say it again, that your art doesn't care about what you think and feel. It's just what you put on the canvas or on the print. And the same thing with athletes. It's the same thing as even our families. I mean, I'm sure they care about how we think and feel to a degree, but if we're beating them up and speaking meanly and not showing up, they care about what we do. Our actions, thank God, are independent of our thoughts and feelings. And that's the point of the deliberate practice, is that it's fun with psychology and we'll talk about a lot of things, but ultimately I want to almost devalue the psychology of it and say, only deal with the psychology as much as you have to. Let's deal with action. So I wanted to get that in.
So the psychology is to solve a problem. When the car isn't running, there comes a point where we're going to stop the car and we're going to look underneath the hood and we're going to figure some things out. It's also interesting. I can imagine a person who wasn't even interested in performing would be fascinated by the fact that a change, that people can speak some words to each other and a person can have an idea dawn in their head that is going to change their ability to perform. That's in itself interesting.
Well, it's good that you say that. I shouldn't say devalue the psychology too much, because we're never without thoughts and feelings. So we actually constantly have to deal with psychology.
Yes.
But yeah, fascinating.
You confirmed a lot of what I had. I had some very good yoga teachers for a few years at a local studio. And a lot of what you had in the chapter on mindfulness, I had been listening to for a few years. That was really useful too. But the chapter that was probably the hardest for me was the one on acceptance and the willingness to feel. Of all things, a psychology of performance class, and this is going to be acceptance of your feelings and the willingness to feel. And there was stuff in there about control, that those are the only places in the guidebook that I put question mark on it. And it was because of emotional responses that inclination to grip control is a protective mechanism. And sometimes somebody will tell me exactly what I need to hear, but it is so hard to process it because it means a total shift of my bearing. That is the one that even this week, when I went through it, I thought, oh gosh, you later dealt with it with being the perfect perfectionist. But there is an ironic subversive quality of the desire to do good work that, if gripped too hard, ends up guaranteeing less good work in the long run. Is that correctly stated?
It is. And I'm so glad that you bring this up as the one that you disliked or was uncomfortable with the most, because that means you were actually really getting what was coming across in that chapter. As many times people think, okay, if I accept it, I'll feel better. I'm like, no, you can't back into it that way. That's still trying to control your feelings and trying to feel better.
Yes.
All the time this happens.
If I accept it, if I choose to accept it because I've got control over it, I'll feel better.
Right.
That's the quandary that I find so difficult.
Yes, as does every other human being. This is another reason why I love being in this, because the high performers that come to me and the challenges that these listeners are facing, I'm telling you, you're human. And how many problems, quote unquote, that you have is probably more directly related to how deeply you care about this. Because just as you expressed, the more I care, the more I'm giving power to my art and my products and my career, then the more I'm giving the power to actually hurt me if it doesn't go well. So I'm going to have the response then to be naturally protective and guarded. And that's just biology. And if you don't accept that, this is where I push back against a lot of the other things about pushing too hard about, well, you have to be confident and stuffing your feelings and, only being positive. It's not the way that the world works. We have 4 basic human emotions: happy, sad, mad, and scared. So how are we going to live in the 25% of happiness when the other 75% of negative experience, unpleasant experiences, are the only other options? It doesn't work that way. So accepting, not resigning ourselves to it, doesn't mean that we have to say everything's fine, and be okay with it. Well, no, I take that back. We don't have to be happy about it, but we do have to be okay with it and bring it along with us. Because when we're struggling with that, when we're trying to think positively or feel better or do this or do that, then again, it comes down from a practical aspect of then we're not spending our time in our craft. The more we try to feel better, I can only do one thing at a time. If I'm going to wrestle with my emotions, I can't pick up my pencil and draw.
I think that chapter is going to be relevant to many of our listeners. A writer who I grew up around, who he and his wife wrote television shows, told me when I was beginning my midlife crisis, and we had conversations about issues in our life, and he told me how he had some of the same issues, and he said a lot of people go into the arts have high control needs. And I saw that that's one of the reasons you go into the arts, is I can build a world. I have control over this thing, even if I don't have control over the other things. And therefore, to acknowledge those control needs, and that a great deal of the response to that is the acceptance and willingness to feel. And that was an encouraging chapter, but it was a difficult chapter for me. So there were things about finding internal motivation and the intrinsic motivation and the extrinsic motivation and how your outside structure and your internal desires interact. I loved all that. That was the stuff that I felt, fortunately, that I've done well with students, is that start with your loves, and then you're going to gradually move into where you're serving clients that you may not love. So that arc is going to happen naturally. But the thing about imagery, using imagery to prepare for action, that was a really good one. And it also seems natural for artists who tend toward imagery anyway, that this is something that you can use well or poorly. And there were some principles to using imagery.
Yeah. And what's exciting about that chapter is when I learned in graduate school, we'd think, okay, relax and just think positive things. And there's actually much more science to it, particularly if you're trying to develop a particular skill or technique. And it's that PET-LEP model, which stands for, to physically actually do it, and the environment, the P and the E are the most important concepts.
Can we pause a moment for the PET-LEP model? It was physical, environmental.
It was task, meaning you had to have a goal, exactly what I want to get accomplished out of it. Timing, doing it in real time. L was the learning, meaning that your imagery will change as you grow. E was the emotion. And then P was the perspective. Do I see myself as a first person or third person perspective?
And so first person is when I am performing the task, I am in my own mind. I'm in my own experience. Third person is when I've seen video of it.
Exactly.
I can look at it coolly and objective. And those are two different modes of how we experience our performance.
Right. And the research doesn't say that one is necessarily better than the other, but if you're tending to work with emotional aspects, you'll probably want to do more of like seeing yourself, see your hand on the easel and drawing or painting or doing things like that. And then if there's more technical things, like I think more in sport, if you wanted to get a serve correctly, or a gymnast, they might look at their body in perfect form from a third person perspective.
Okay, I'm sorry to have stopped you on that, but you did mention Petlep, and I think most of our listeners aren't going to know that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's a good point. Well, and so what the research has shown is that, again, different from where we would sit down in a comfortable environment and just kind of imagine things going really well. The big points, I think, for your listeners are, well, if you are going to do the imagery, try to do it in your studio. And then see what you're going there. Actually hold the pencil or the paint brushes, physically move. And you don't have to necessarily paint, but if there's something that you are, creating or doing, and then the emotions that you bring into it. For imagery would be really great here is if you're really feeling stuck, imagine yourself feeling stuck, and then you already have a plan of maybe how you might overcome it. And then how do you go from being stuck to unstuck? Maybe you're going back to those values that we had talked about. Maybe you have a picture of that outcome. Maybe it's just a deadline. Whatever it is that you're using, but you can practice that changing of emotions. And that's the big difference that they used to call imagery visualization and just kind of seeing what you wanted. But the more you can get the functional overlap, the more we can activate other parts of our brain to make it a more realistic experience by having the environment physically moving, including the emotions, the much richer and more effective and the better the learning the imagery can be.
And one of the points I think you made in there is that even if an athlete is injured and cannot do the exercises, they can still use that. It's PETTLEP, the Petlep acronym, to guide themselves toward imagery that helps. This is an aside, but when I was 19, there was a popular book called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. Are you at all familiar with it, or have you heard of it?
I might have heard the title, but I'm not familiar with it.
I think he was the one who established the popular term self-image. He was a plastic surgeon, as I recall, who found that you could change somebody's face and it wouldn't change their life at all. You could change somebody else's face and it would completely turn their life around, so that it was not the plastic surgery that did it. It was their perception of themselves. And he developed a series of books, but that was the one that was so popular. And that was where I was first introduced to this idea that you can perform your musical instrument even if you are locked into a seat on a cross-country flight by vividly imagining. And he suggested that the more vividly you imagine it, including the ambient sounds and the smells and the discomfort of your posture when you're going to be there and what those blinding lights are like, the more vividly you imagine it, and the more you can realistically imagine it going well, not I'm a god, but I think it's going well, the more you are rehearsing in advance emotional experiences that can be performed when performing. I saw a correlation between what I read 40 years ago and then what you brought up, but was much more based on research, I think, than what Maxwell Maltz did.
Well, he's definitely on the right track there. I mean, it goes back to those, mental representations. So again, for your listeners, I think 1 step better, 1% better than where you are is the best imagery to be having, because you can more clearly get that mental representation of where you want to go and strive towards that. And as you're imagining it, you're actually getting firing of the brain to those muscles for the motor learning. And that's why the specificity and exactness of what you want is important. Like, I could imagine myself dunking like LeBron James, but that's going to do nothing for my confidence because it's way too great. And it's going to do nothing for my motor learning because I really don't know how he's doing any of that. But whatever skill that I want to improve on, I know what that next step is that I want to get. Maybe I've stumbled on it and I'm kind of making mistakes. And the research is outstanding about how much more you can actually physically learn just through the mental imagery. Because with that functional overlap and with those neural pathways being rehearsed, you are getting real learning. And that's for motor skills. But the same thing happens when we think about the cognitive maps and other things about, the emotions that we want to rehearse in those scenarios too. So again, I can't say enough for the performance anxiety. Being able to, yes, imagine yourself being, confident, but spend even more time imagining yourself being nervous, because that's what you should be.
Good.
And then imagine yourself handling the nervousness, because that's what's actually going to happen. So we don't want imagery to be fantasy. That's not going to get you anywhere. What do you really have to deal with? And Bandura said this too. It's not really about reducing anxiety, but you'll do much better building your confidence that you can handle the anxiety you'll have. And there's a critical difference there.
There sure is. You use the term proximity in your lectures, which is that something you just touched on earlier. I want to take just a moment with that. That's really valuable. That if it's a big, huge, long-term goal, it can be so inaccessible that it doesn't do any short-term good and can even discourage. But if it's, as you said, the thing I'm going to do tomorrow, the goal I have this week, the concrete thing that is close, it's in proximity, to imagine that's handleable.
Yeah, I think that goes back into lecture 3, which I had to skip over because I talked over you. But when we talk about values and goals, people think about, dream big and have these long-term goals. And the research finds that doesn't do anything for you. In fact, sometimes imagining too positive a goal undermines your motivation to get there, because you get the dopamine burst of actually imagining success and you already have it. It kills your motivation. And then when you imagine the long-term goals, it's just kind of a dream out there. So please, take those, have them, but understand they're the least effective goals to have. How do you translate that into your short-term goal? And ultimately, what do I need to do today to take that one step towards that? And if you have those daily goals, very actionable steps that'll feed into that long-term one, that's where you want your attention.
That is great. That's great. Now, you moved on to things like developing focused attention, which was almost a theme, that one of the most important things with the whole course. One of the main things I got out of it, as just a macro view, was that there is a science to excellence. And then below that, one of the most common themes was be here now, in the moment, with focused attention, and that will solve a lot of problems.
Yes.
All of those other things, acceptance and willingness to feel and imagery and all of that stuff, that almost clusters around the living in the moment. Focused attention in the moment, I think, was one of the terms you used.
If I had to boil it down to one skill, you're right. It is about the attention, because ultimately, if you think about performance, we're always performing in the here and now. And our problems come out because our mind is typically in the past or the future. I mean, if you just take any aspect of your day, I find that we're really rarely present where our feet are. And so whether it be the mindfulness chapter that really talks about how that is probably the best skill to be able to develop focused attention, to anxiety and choking, it ends up being about, thinking about the wrong thing at the wrong time, to, flow states and being totally engrossed in the here and now. I mean, I'm glad it showed up all over the course, because it actually runs through everything. We live life moment to moment. And it's wonderful that we've got this brain that lets us go into the past and the future. And there are times that we want to do it. Please plan for retirement, learn from your past mistakes. But the ability to choose your attention when you want to put it where you want to, with volitional control, you'll never get 100% at it. That's not the way the brain is built. So don't feel bad that, my mind keeps wandering. Number one complaint of people practicing mindfulness, I just can't stay focused. I'm like, yes, that's exactly the whole point of the practice. It's to lose focus and then refocus, just like weightlifting. Well, I don't throw it up in the air and expect the weight to float. Gravity brings it down. Nobody gets upset about that, because we understand gravity. We know that we build strength because of the repetition. So quick lesson here for your mindfulness or your focus training. Every single one of you are never, ever going to be able to pay attention to anything without getting distracted. I mean, I don't know how long we've been doing this podcast so far, but I'm sure that you've been distracted at least 15 to 20 times, at least. And the best you can do is catch it early and bring it back. And if you can accept that and become comfortable with that process, and just, whether it be in your mindfulness practice or in a classroom or when you're trying to get some work done, give yourself some compassion and realize that, okay, my mind's just doing what it's supposed to do. But recognize you can develop the skill that every time you catch it and bring it back, you strengthen your awareness and ability to do that. And that's the best we can do. And that's actually good enough.
to bring it back around to how this relates to a career, it's the awareness of a professional. That a person is aware, I am not in the moment, but at least I know I'm not in the moment.
Right.
And therefore, I can gently and with self-compassion. And okay, I know that my inclination is to want to spend 24 hours with you and to have a conversation about each one. Let me quickly go through some of these titles to get this out of the way and to move on to another couple things I want to ask you.
Okay.
There's a chapter on superstitions, rituals, and routines. A chapter on getting in the zone. The chapter on performance anxiety and choking is a huge one for some people. Being the perfect perfectionist, I'm going to let people just go to your guidebook. By the way, our podcast, because it's sponsored by Wondrium, allows everybody listening to get in on your course for free for whatever it is, I think 14 days or something like that. You can get it at wondrium.com/draftsmen. I have to confess to you, I spent way more time in this guidebook than I did in the lectures because of my love of taking my time. The lectures to me are a bit like trying to drink from a fire hose or at least a garden hose. Most of it's going to go right past me. Whereas this, I'm going to sip each teaspoon of it and ingest it. So I just filled it with notes. But you have access to the PDF of the guidebook. And so being the perfect perfectionist, you need this if that's your issue. Burnout was one that was really very sobering. The dangers of burnout and how burnout's been studied. And I know some people in my life, and I've had some experiences in my life where I began to burn out. That was one of those ones that was excruciating to read because it happens with professionals. Pain tolerance, injury rehabilitation, the dangerous pursuit of the ideal body. The chapter on fan psychology, fan identification, and violence, I didn't expect to get that much out of, but because I've been such a fan of writers and filmmakers and artists and performers, not of sports particularly, and one of the great ironies of it is that I expected, because it ends on the word violence, that it was going to be a negative view of fan psychology. I was surprised at how much being a fan can affect our lives positively. Oh, yeah. Were you a fan through your childhood and adolescence, and are you still?
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Can we know of whom?
Yeah, and finally now I can say it, and I can say it proudly, but the Buffalo Bills. I went through a really difficult 20 years.
Because they didn't do well?
Yeah, we missed the playoffs for 17 years. But with Josh Allen now, and we just made it to the AFC Championship game last year, like we're back. But I've been a Bills fan since wide right back in Super Bowl 25. Jumped on the bandwagon then, and then we went through these tough years. And what's so funny about it is, right, the negativity of it, shows up when I don't like the draft pick, or they have a losing season, and I have that sadness. But the benefits of it, I was just down in Florida for the Miami and the Bills game, and you see somebody else wearing the jersey, and you just immediately have friends. And, you just go, hey, 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 and they respond in the same way. And you have this sense of community and belongingness. And then the interesting thing, too, is the Fairweather fan. One of my favorite stats in the course about that is, the Fairweather fans be like, yeah, we won. And, oh, man, they lost again. It's like you're only on the team when they're doing well. And then I like at the end, and what I hope my fandom, because the Bills have never won a Super Bowl, but I can't imagine how rich, like I'm actually starting to get tearful thinking about it. When they win, and I know it's coming soon, when they win, like this lifetime of 30 years of fandom is just going to be so rewarding, in the same way, like for the Cubs fans and stuff like that. It's just, the psychology of fandom, it's a fun topic.
It really is. It was much more interesting than I expected it to be. I saw how much it applied to me, and also made me acknowledge that we want something bigger than ourselves, even if it isn't going well, to identify with, to care for, to pay attention to, and yes, the thing of community too. Teamwork, talent, a developmental process, how to be a great sport parent. Oh, what a wonderful chapter. And also applicable to teachers.
Absolutely.
That there is a balance between caring and getting out of the way, and that it can be done well and it can be done very badly. Oh, that was just a thoughtful gift to the world, Dr. Eddie. I was really, really excited about that chapter. Even though my parenting job is over, I felt like this is something that for the rest of my life, I want to immerse myself in what the principles are of to be a good sport parent in order to be a good guide for talent.
Yeah, and we really shouldn't call it sport parent because that was a context that I'd used. But if I could change any of the titles, I could even just leave it at parent or performance parent, because again, whether you're encouraging an artist or a musician or somebody who wants to do well in academics, I mean, this is about how to raise people up so that you can keep them out of my office, right? Because it's when they're growing up and we get these negative coaching behaviors, whether it's from a parent or the expectations, mixing up their identity and their worth. The whole idea of being able to learn about a mastery mindset as opposed to competition too early. These are things that will just create a better generation, not only performance-wise, but more importantly for mental health and physical health-wise. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's one I'm particularly pleased with myself.
Yes, and it does. Part of it was going back to what you mentioned earlier, how much of it is the responsibility of the athlete and not of the child at first.
Right.
But as things go on to where there's greater and greater autonomy, it's just really beautifully stated, beautifully presented. The final chapter on aging athletes competing and retiring is something that, as I was reading, I was thinking most of my students aren't going to care about this because they're anywhere from between the ages of 18 and 30. And so aging seems far away. But for those of you who are the older ones in our audience, there's a lot in there. Okay, now I've gone through basically all the topics you had in there, but you also mentioned that a lot of this is to keep people out of your office. And so there's a few things I want to ask you about that. First of all, I should have begun with the technical designation. You are a psychologist, a psychiatrist. You have a PhD in sports psychology. Tell us what how you categorize yourself.
Yeah, so I guess I say my official title would be a performance psychologist. And so I have a clinical psychology PhD, and I'm a licensed psychologist in the state of Michigan. I'm also a fellow and a certified mental performance consultant through the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. I'm on the U.S. Olympic Committee or the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee Sports Psychology Registry. And that is the certification. It just kind of lets you know that I've got the minimum requirements of working with athletes in this sport context of it. Because there's nothing about because sports psychology and excellence is different. Whereas typically you'll think about psychology, you kind of think about like if this is average, and then you're good people who are below average. And then sports psychology is kind of like, well, this is average, and how do we get above it? So I wanted to not just specialize in that, but I wanted to help people throughout the continuum, which is why I'm a licensed psychologist. So a lot of people who are mental performance consultants, they don't really call themselves sports psychologists, but people group it together. But there is a big difference between the mental training and then the ability to be able to handle the pathology that might go along with it. So as I had said, I ended up specializing then in the things like performance anxiety and injury, lack of motivation, the things that performers would struggle with the most.
Well, you've been a counselor to many, many athletes, right? Over decades.
Yeah.
Is the difference between developing a course that you've put together for the great courses and counseling an individual athlete? I assume they're quite different worlds where you're dealing with a general public versus dealing with an individual who you are reading for what they need specifically.
The fun thing is that the challenge of doing the course was that most of the great courses, they call them rock star professors. So they get the people who have been the best at teaching, and then they just do it, in front of the camera. And I'd only taught a couple of classes because I was a clinician much of my career. So I was like, okay, well, this sounds great. I was like, but I got to start creating something from scratch. And so the course actually comes out of my clinical work. So there's a nice overlap because the main perspective that I had was sort of, well, what have I seen over the last 20 years? And that is what helped me choose the topics. It helped me kind of organize it in a way that made the most sense. And then it was fun to kind of be able to be like, well, these are the problems that I want the listeners, the viewers to be able to solve. And so let me just back it up with some research and then give some examples that illustrate it. And so it wasn't, the feedback that I'm hearing from you lets me know that as a group, we were successful. I wanted to have intellectual integrity, but I also wanted it very applied. And I also didn't want it limited to sport. So again, sport is a nice context for life. But again, I've worked with actresses and concert pianists and symphony and artists and even different sports like dog agility, the ones that you wouldn't think are the most popular, football, baseball. And it's just amazing to me how we're much more alike than different. So please don't let the idea of sport, turn people away. I've been so pleased with how people said, I got those examples, but to some degree, we're all athletes. You had asked me before we started, like, well, what do I think of as a performer? I'm like, well, a performer is somebody who wants to get something done.
Okay.
We all want to get something done, and we all have roles that we want to perform. And there's a measurement of good or well, and then there's a measurement of not doing as good or well. And so it's really, I like to simplify it in that way so that these concepts can help people live, coming full circle, their best lives. You get to decide what the performance context is, but all of these principles will apply.
After reading the table of contents, I thought, I think this is going to be interesting to make the leap from sports to the arts, partly because it's a leap. It's a creative leap. It isn't that big a leap. Stephen Sondheim, the songwriter, in the beginning of his book, Finishing the Hat, where he talks about his life in songwriting, also talked about his love of reading cooking columns by chefs, even though he's not a cook, he's not a chef. But somehow he is able to make the leap from what a chef does and what a songwriter does. So that the fact that they aren't the same means that your imagination is involved in making these links. Now, the course to me seems surprisingly complete. And surprisingly, because I didn't expect all of those topics to be so interesting. But you have mentioned that you don't feel like it's complete, right? Is there more that you intend to add to it? Is there stuff in there that you wish had been in there, but isn't yet?
Yeah, there's one big one that I really wish I took a half hour and did one on sleep and recovery.
Sleep and recovery.
Sleep and recovery. Especially now with the, what's gone on in the last 2 years and the things we've been with. But I've been on this bandwagon for a couple of years more recently. The actual number one performance enhancer is sleep. The importance of getting your 8 hours. And if you're physically active, the 9 hours. If you're a teenager, the 9 hours. When you start to get into the 7 hours or God forbid, less than 6, the damage that you're actually doing to your body on a daily basis is tremendous. Wow. And we have all become, our culture just like sacrifices sleep, and we reward the people who come to work early and stay late. But the research has shown, and all the sport teams are up on this now. I mean, they've even got sleep pods in college football locker rooms. You listen to any of like Usain Bolt and Tom Brady and LeBron James, and they will tell you that they are getting their 9, 10, 11, sometimes 12 hours of sleep, because learning, motor development. I mean, there's not one organ in your body, there's not one process that your body goes through that is not affected by sleep.
Wow.
So to not have that in the course, I'm disappointed that I'm like, boy, I would really want to get that across. And I'll tell you, when I have athletes or performers coming in, I absolutely do a quick sleep assessment. And if they're getting less than 6, I won't do any mental training until I get them up to 8 hours of sleep.
Is that right? It's that big a deal.
I refuse to teach or address any symptoms or anything else, because I'm like, you got a cup, and if you're not sleeping, you got a bunch of holes in it. So I don't care what I pour into it and what strategies, you're not going to be able to do it. Look, you've got this beautiful Ferrari of a body, and there's no gas in it. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we don't take the sleep. And this is on a daily basis. We could do many podcasts on this.
I'm inclined to, because what you brought up is revolutionary. It's thought-provoking. It's sobering. And also the fact that you will not take on a client who isn't getting their sleep. It's sort of like you've got self-therapy that you're neglecting by sleeping those extra hours that I can't make up for if you're not doing the work of not doing the work of resting.
Well, let me clarify. I take them on, but I won't address anything else. The only thing we're going to do is sleep. I'll absolutely take them on because I can help them sleep better and figure out why they're not and change their, but I let them know right from the beginning, like, look, I know you want to learn some strategies for your game tomorrow, but let me get you into bed earlier and you will have an immediate impact on your game tomorrow if you sleep 8 hours versus 6. Now, if we start to build that for 2 weeks, I've had people come back and half the problems they're coming to see me with are just disappearing because they've improved their sleep.
Is that right? So in about 2 weeks, you can help a person within about 2 weeks to get better sleep. You've got ways of doing that.
Yeah, I've got ways that help people overnight. I mean, it's all a matter of, again, here's where we go. I can't do the push-ups for you, but I can give you the guidelines. And it kind of depends on, some people just didn't know. I mean, it's a scientific fact that when we're sleep deprived, we don't know that we're sleep deprived. Mm-hmm. Like people say, I only need 5 hours. Well, what makes you think that? It's like, well, because I'm doing fine. Well, that's like the person who's drunk and saying I can drive home. We all know you can't, but they don't know that. So we can't trust that. The science says, and the research over and over again, is that you are impaired. And then I even say it, I was like, okay, let's say you can get by on 7 hours, right? Because you can get by on it. What kind of performance enhancing attitude is that? I'm telling you, if you go from 7 to 8, if you go from 8 to 9, which people think, oh, that's ridiculous. If you go from 8 to 9, you have performance enhancing effects.
I can tell you are passionate about this.
I'm passionate and almost angry. because everything goes, the world doesn't support it. Our jobs don't support it. We're sending kids to school at 7 o'clock in the morning. These poor teenagers, where they need to be sleeping. I have never woken my children up from a nap. I know a lot of parents will do that, but one of the proudest things I've done as a parent is I have never woken my child up in the middle of the afternoon or sleeping in or anything else. And I'm telling you, particularly for one of my kids who was just great at the beginning about putting himself to bed before the rest of the family, I think a lot of his success had to do with his sleep schedule because every single day he was maximizing his learning. He's maximizing his retention. He was clearing his mind so that when he went to school the next day, he was able to absorb the information. It affects mood. It affects weight gain. It affects hunger. For me personally, I told you I like to lift heavy things. When I found out that if you go to bed earlier, at the early stages of sleep, and you're getting your full hours, you get the most human growth hormone dump into your body. So if you want to, I was like, well, okay, I'll sleep longer, just to maximize my workout to get more HGH.
Oh,
so whatever motivation you have, whatever reason you have to not sleep, I will be able to tell you a reason why that sleep will by far move your productivity up for whatever half hour or hour that you're missing. I promise you.
I found also that I used to sleep 10, 11 hours a night just all the time. It was just a natural thing through my adolescence and 20s and 30s. And as I've gotten older, it's gone down to 9 and sometimes 8 hours and 8 hours. Some people say, oh, I never sleep 8 hours. I sleep until I'm done sleeping. Most of the time, I don't wake up to an alarm. And it is for reasons that you're mentioning. Is that I just do better when I finished the cycle without having been abruptly yanked out of it. Is that an important part of it? That if you sleep naturally, you wake up at 7.5 hours, that's okay?
Yeah, you can test that. I mean, it's again, here's where we get into that clarification of medical advice that we said at the beginning here. So this is, of course, general because there are early birds that get up early. There are, night owls that have to be on different shifts. But I'm going to make it towards the point of a big conversation in the performance aspect of what about naps? Well, the best thing is naps can help, but if you're sleeping only 6 hours and then supplementing with a nap, it's much, much better to tack it on at the end and get it fully through because not all sleep is created equally. At the beginning of the night, in the first couple of hours, you're getting your deeper stage 4 sleep. And that tends to shorten as the night goes on. And then you start to get more REM sleep. And each of those sleep stages have different restorative properties. So if you're getting up early and shortening it at the end, you're going to miss out on the REM. If you're going to bed way too late, you're missing the greatest opportunity for the deep sleep and you're going to feel different. But if you're getting your full 8 hours, there's also a science to the power naps. You can't make up sleep. So another aspect of it is that if you know you're going to be up and you're like, okay, I'll catch up on the weekends. There is no such thing as catching up. Once you've lost it, you've lost it. But if you know that you're going to be sleep deprived because you have an all night thing that you need to do. Sleep ahead of time. Store up the sleep, and then it tends to buffer the detrimental effects on your performance while you're without sleep. And then going to the naps, this is where you're talking about the sleep cycles. We go in about a 90-minute sleep cycle to get through all of the stages, the light, the heavy, and the REM. So if you're going to take a power nap, you really want to limit it to about 20 minutes or less, 25 minutes, because that keeps you in the light stages of sleep. And that actually has restorative effects. Usain Bolt, I believe, would take a nap before he won a gold medal. Mm-hmm. It helps. But if you start to creep into that hour, now you're in the deep sleep phase. And when you get out of that, you get a sleep hangover. You're groggy, your brain's not really online, you can actually feel worse. So if you have to take a long nap, you try to do it around that 90 minutes. So that's when you say you're not getting that interruption. If you're letting yourself wake up naturally, I would assume it's probably at the end of that REM cycle. And you tend to go through about 4 or 5 of these cycles a night of 90 minutes. The most important thing for sleep is a consistent bedtime and awake time, which is probably what my performers fight with the most, because our lives aren't quite that structured and we want to sleep in on the weekends. But it's been consistently shown more than anything that the number one thing to enhance your sleep, to develop that circadian rhythm, our bodies love rhythm, is to be consistent with your sleep and wake time. So that's one anyway.
This is just wonderful. You've got that's strong. It explains so much. I think back on a friend of ours who was a racquetball champion, and she told us that she slept 10, 11 hours every night and how important that was to her.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was not in the course.
That was not. And if you guys know, if you've got creators, right? I mean, more than athletes, right? You have this unique aspect where creation is important in thinking. And again, I'm not an artist, I can't speak for it, but I mean, from everything you've told me and the artists that I've talked with, the thinking and the clarity of thought and the ability to focus, all of this is tremendously enhanced. But if you want to create more and you're sleeping 6 hours, forget everything else. Go to bed. If you're only at 7 hours and you want to create more, I don't care what strategies you have to get more creative. Just go to bed. Please test me, challenge me. Give me 30 days of 8 to 9 hours of consistent bed, and you tell me how much better you are. Send me an email, dreddie@dreddieoconnor.com.
The doctor has spoken. You have heard it. There are no excuses for I didn't know. Okay, now many of our listeners, maybe most of our listeners, may not be able to afford you, to hire you as a therapist. So there's 2 other things I want to ask you. Well, one of them may take too long. One is if you just had 10 minutes with a person or an hour with a person, let alone 6 months or a year, what is your strategy for how you deal with a person?
Sure.
Do you have an order of the way you help a client?
Well, a couple of times, so if I consult with a team, for example, I might only have 10 minutes. And so really, I've got this warehouse of knowledge. And so the dialogue will go something like this. They'll say, "Hey, doc, what do you need?" They'll quickly tell me the problem and I'll give them the strategy to fix it. Okay. It's a Band-Aid, but honestly, half the time that they just didn't know. I'll give you a quick example of a tennis player who had all these focus issues, et cetera. And I said, "Well, what do you choose to focus on?" She said, "Excuse me?" I'm like, "Well, what do you pick to focus on?" She goes, "Well, tennis." I'm like, "But specifically?" She goes, "I don't know what you mean." I'm like, "Okay." I was like, do you choose your attention?" She goes, "No, I just pay attention to whatever's going on. Sometimes it's the ref, sometimes it's the people there, it's what they're saying, it's my opponent's doing." I'm like, "Okay, just do this. What do you think is the most important thing to pay attention to?" She goes, "The ball." I'm like, I'm not a tennis coach, but I'm not going to go out of my lane, but I would think that's a good thing. Why don't you try focusing on the ball by choice? A week later, her anxiety's down and she's performing better. So sometimes it can be that simple that we haven't been told some of these. I mean, I'd love to say that sports psychology is rocket science, but as you go through the course, it isn't. I mean, I'm teaching, adolescents this, and I want to make it simple. And some of these things can be. So if I had only had 10 minutes, I'd be like, "What's your problem?" Now, if I've only got 10 minutes with you and I had to pick one strategy, it would be this. Focus on the win. And WIN stands for what's important now. So much like you had said, Marshall, you were like, "Gosh, this focus thing seems to be coming through the whole course and things of that nature." The number one strategy I think that my athletes and performers benefit from and report in my lectures or presentations when I give it, the favorite strategy is always this win concept. If you can ask yourself throughout the day, what's important now? And bring your attention to that. And you ask yourself this 10, 20, 30 times a day, you will do so much better. So if I said right now, Marshall, what's important now, right? Your mind might be wandering. If I said, what's important now, what would your performance enhancing answer be?
My performance enhancing answer would be to not drag this on too long and wear you out.
Nope.
But bad answer, right?
Right. Well, and that's why I ask it, because we think, okay, that makes sense. But a lot of times people will be like, well, what's important now is to get better, or they give me some outcome. The most important, thing is to be my very best, or the most important thing right now is to focus. And I say, no, in this conversation, what's most important now is me, because I'm speaking and we're having a conversation. Now
that's right.
Means right now.
Yeah.
So if it's what's important now, if I'm sitting with my family, it's my family and having that conversation. If it's making dinner, it's the ingredients that I'm cooking or the minute that I have there. If I am 10 seconds ahead or behind, that's not what's most important. What's important now? If I'm studying for a test, it's studying for the test, not getting a good grade on the test. That's an outcome.
Right.
So what's important now is an action step of what I can do. And so for the last hour, Marshall, you and I, what's most important now is me listening to your questions, giving an enthusiastic answer, and you listening to me and responding and being engaged. Anything else that comes from that, I can take care of my fatigue, and you probably guess I'm not going to get tired of this. We can keep going, but those are the things that we get caught up in. And by all means, if I have 10 minutes with you, I would just go into depth and go through many examples of what's important now in every stage of your life. If you can identify that, a lot of your problems are going to go away, because you can only do one thing at a time. And if you know what the most important thing is and commit yourself to that, you're golden.
At this moment.
At this very moment, as it's happening.
Dr. Eddie, this has been so good. It has been so useful.
Good.
To our audience, you make the application to how this relates to your drawing, painting, podcasting, music, whatever it is. This is a Draftsmen podcast, and we've talked often about the fundamentals, the elements, the principles of what picture making is. I would love to spend 24 weeks with 1 week per chapter on 25 now, because we've added sleep. And sleep would come early in the whole thing. Get sleep first, or else we're not going to carry through.
Yes.
Now, if our audience wants to keep in touch with you, what are the best ways for them to keep in touch with what you're offering?
Sure. Well, the easiest central place is my website, dreddieoconnor.com. DreddieOconnor. People spell it wrong sometimes. Okay. So that's the nice hub for everything else. What I'd really, like you had mentioned about, I certainly have individual consulting. I can consult with people all over the country, internationally too, because now with telehealth in particular. So I've got a fully functioning telehealth practice. But what I'm really excited about, and where you may be particularly interested, is in a new project that I have developed over the last year called Success Stories Membership. A number of people who've been through my course are actually in this membership as a follow-up. And it's kind of the best of both, where I'm creating the modules of everything that we had talked about to be in modular format. But as you had said, this can be pretty dense, and maybe the fire hose or fire hydrant, rather, drinking it so quickly in the course. The idea of a membership is that you can pace yourself and take the information as is comfortable for you. So when you had said, what would I advise for somebody if I had 6 months or a year? Investing a year into the membership would be a fantastic way to go, and extremely cost effective. Because it's a community of high achievers working together. You get my personal instruction through the recorded modules, and then you get to do it at your own pace. So I'm going to offer something special now for the people who want to jump in early. I'm still creating it, so it's at a lower price right now. And this is going to be the summer of the membership, where I'm going to really invest in completing all the modules and really leveling it up. But if you want to get in early, it's closed right now. I only did one launch, and then I opened it up for a little bit because I'm really working on it. But if you send me an email with Draftsmen as like a code word, I'll just open it up personally for you to get you in. And if you want to do that in the next 3 months, you'll get in at sort of that founding member, early member price. Because then once I've got it fully built and it's fully functioning, it'll be a bit more of an investment. And if you join now, you're locked in for your life. As long as you want to stay a member, I won't raise the price on you. So it's a real advantage if you want to get in early. So you can just send me an email through my website with Draftsmen, and I'll send you a link to get in.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. This was a privilege to get to interview Dr. Eddie O'Connor. Thanks for being with us, and looking forward to more.
Yes, let's do it again. Best wishes to everybody.
Bye.